Captain Elias Vorn floated awkwardly in the docking bay, the hum of the station's magnetic locks vibrating through his boots as he tried not to stare at the alien craft that had just docked with Trivara's orbiting outpost. The vessel was sleek, impossibly smooth, and completely devoid of markings that made any sense to human engineers. Its surface reflected the harsh lights of the bay, making it look almost like liquid metal slowly folding over itself. Somewhere in the background, a maintenance drone, probably designed to polish surfaces automatically, collided with a support beam, sparking and twirling in a bizarre imitation of a ballet dancer before the AI's voice squeaked, "I regret nothing." Elias winced. That was the third drone that week to attempt interpretive dance near visiting dignitaries, and he had the feeling that things were about to get exponentially weirder. The alien queen emerged from her craft in a cascade of soft, luminescent fabric that seemed to hum as she moved. Elias' first thought, shock and maybe a hint of professional panic, was that she looked almost human, but then her long ears brushed the tops of her shoulders, twitching slightly, catching stray air currents and betraying the faintest ripple of curiosity. Her copper eyes scanned the bay as if she were reading not just the layout of the room, but the intentions of everyone in it, and Elias felt a little self-conscious about the way he had missed shaving that morning. The other humans in the bay were frozen in a mix of awe and confusion, a mid-moment of hesitation that left their coffee cups hanging in the air, spilling slowly like tiny floating moons. Someone coughed loudly, a sound that seemed to echo in the suspended silence, and the queen's eyes flicked toward them, ears twitching once more. Elias imagined she was already filing that cough under annoying but potentially entertaining. "Greetings, human personnel," she said, her voice soft but with a resonance that seemed to bypass the usual sound waves and settle directly in the chest cavity, vibrating a little too pleasantly. "I am Queen Alithara of the Leora Dominion. Your accommodations are adequate." The word hung in the air like a challenge wrapped in silk. Elias stepped forward, careful to maintain the rigid posture drilled into him during decades of human military training, but the moment he spoke, his voice betrayed him with a nervous quaver. "Welcome to Trivara Station, Your Majesty. I'm Captain Elias Vorn, your human liaison. I hope your journey was comfortable." He grimaced at the awkwardness but forced a smile. One of the crew muttered under their breath, "Comfortable." She traveled in a warp bubble across 12 parsecs. He's worried about seat cushions. Elias couldn't decide whether to scowl at the comment or laugh. Humor was supposed to reduce tension, but the queen's ears twitched again, and he had the horrifying suspicion she might appreciate the joke too much. The queen's smile was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it carried a weight of calculated amusement. "I find humor in minor human anxieties," she said, almost casually, and Elias felt the words settle like gravity in the pit of his stomach. Then, to his relief and alarm simultaneously, she paused, flicking her ears toward one of the floating drones that had become tangled in a cable. "This one appears to dance involuntarily," she observed, her tone teasing. "Perhaps you train them this way to welcome guests?" A laugh escaped from one of the engineers entirely unplanned, and the drone's AI screeched, "No, ma'am, I was, celebrating your arrival." Elias tried to look stern but failed, cracking a grin as he realized the first act of diplomacy might involve a levitating robot boogie. Her attention returned to him, and he noticed the subtle way her eyes seemed to measure the room, scanning the stations, the humans, and even the slightly tilted painting in the recreation lounge, all in one effortless motion. "Captain Vorn, I understand that you are responsible for human liaison duties," she said. "Yet you appear anxious." Her ears flicked again, a curious twitch. "Is this normal behavior for your kind when confronted with interstellar royalty?" Elias considered the possibility of lying, then decided honesty might be safer than trying to invent the social norms of an alien species. "Yes, Your Majesty. We have a tradition of awkwardness in the presence of beings far superior to us," he said, only half joking. The queen tilted her head and Elias' stomach did a slow somersault. He could swear her smile widened slightly at the statement, although the corner of it remained enigmatic. They proceeded to the station's main observation deck, which overlooked Trivara's frozen surface like a massive, sparkling jewel. Artificial gravity hummed softly beneath their feet as they walked, and Elias noted the way her long ears moved subtly with each step, brushing just above the shoulder-length flowing fabric of her ceremonial garb. She occasionally reached a hand toward a holographic console, and the moment her fingers hovered near the controls, the holograms responded almost before she touched them. "Your technology is quaint," she commented lightly, eyes glittering with that mixture of amusement and authority. "I detect clever design, human ingenuity paired with charming limitations." Elias couldn't decide if he should laugh, bow, or ask for a manual on how to survive flattery from someone who could probably read his DNA with a glance. The humor of the moment became more pronounced when a minor mishap occurred. One of the cargo bots delivering supplies to the observation deck had a programming glitch, causing it to spin in zero gravity and spray packets of synthetic tea everywhere. The tea floated in slow arcs resembling a chaotic star map. Elias tried to catch a packet and instead collided with a railing, nearly knocking himself into a vent. Queen Alethara's copper eyes twinkled, and her ears flicked as if she were laughing at the spectacle, though her composure never broke. "Your species finds peril amusing," she observed dryly, almost kindly. Elias swallowed the nervous chuckle lodged in his throat, realizing that between the humor and her dangerous charisma, he might not survive this encounter unscathed. By the end of their initial tour, Elias understood the truth. Being in the presence of the queen was like standing in a storm you wanted to walk into, eyes open, arms outstretched, knowing you could be crushed but somehow hoping for exhilaration instead. She whispered small observations, questions that seemed innocuous but were weighted with subtext. "Do humans truly fear what they cannot comprehend, Captain, or do they simply enjoy pretending?" Each whisper sent shivers down his spine, even as the absurdity of floating tea and malfunctioning bots kept his sense of humor alive. Somewhere deep in the station, the maintenance AI continued its faltering ballet, punctuating every moment of tension with mechanical squeaks and pirouettes. Elias realized he was caught between professional duty and something far more dangerous. The intoxicating curiosity, humor, and charm of a being who was both almost human and utterly alien. A being whose long ears seemed to twitch at every heartbeat of his own. And he knew, even then, that no training manual, no protocol, and certainly no rational thought could prepare him for what it meant to follow her whispers. Elias Vorn had not expected diplomacy to be so exhausting, or so entertaining. The day began with the queen hovering over a holographic projection of the station, her long ears twitching at every flicker of light as she traced the orbital paths of cargo satellites. "Captain," she said, "you humans insist on spinning large metal objects around your planets to amuse yourselves." Elias tried not to laugh as he replied, "It's tradition, Your Majesty. Also, very inefficient defense system." She arched an eyebrow and tilted her head, ears brushing the edge of her shoulder. "I see. So inefficiency is a form of pride among humans?" The edges of her lips curved in something dangerously close to a smile. Elias realized he had been roped into a philosophical debate before breakfast. Their morning continued with training simulations in the zero-gravity combat bay. Elias had assumed the queen would observe passively, perhaps make a few polite remarks, but instead she intervened directly. "You wield your energy sword as if it is a delicate fruit," she said, eyes narrowing in mock accusation. Elias felt a flush creep up his neck. "Delicate fruit?" he repeated. "I've never been accused of fruit-like combat before." The queen's ears flicked just a millimeter and he swore she was suppressing laughter. "Fruit, yes, but lethal fruit," she added, and Elias discovered that being complimented and mocked simultaneously could induce a dizzying sensation, somewhere between arousal and panic. During one sparring round, a bot malfunctioned, spinning into midair like a top. Its magnetic repulsors misfired, sending a small crate hurtling toward the ceiling. Elias instinctively ducked, only to collide with the queen herself. Her weight was surprisingly light. She pivoted midair, hair brushing against his chest, long ears flaring slightly, and landed gracefully. "I see humans train by flinging objects at each other," she said. "Amusing, if hazardous." Elias, red-faced and flustered, could only nod as the training bot spun past, broadcasting a distorted rendition of what sounded suspiciously like a love song. The queen's ears twitched again. He didn't know whether to apologize or thank her for finding the humor in chaos. Later, they gathered in the station's hydroponics bay to discuss strategy and intelligence sharing. The room smelled faintly of algae and recycled oxygen, and bioluminescent plants cast soft, shifting shadows across the walls. "You cultivate your own food here," the queen observed. "Clever, though not elegant." Elias grinned. "Elegance is overrated. Also, it's the only way to keep the crew from fighting over synthetic protein packs." She laughed, an ethereal, tinkling sound that made him forget his previous frustrations. "I detect humor in your explanation," she said. "It is oddly charming." As he showed her a floating nutrient packet, it slipped from his hand, drifting lazily toward her. She caught it effortlessly with 2 fingers, ears flicking, and Elias could have sworn she smirked. "Human dexterity under duress," she noted. Midday brought the inevitable security briefings. Reports of unusual transmissions from rogue human factions had everyone on edge. Elias listened, trying to maintain professional detachment, while the queen leaned over the console, fingers hovering above the controls. "You monitor your own kind with such dedication," she murmured. "Do humans trust one another at all?" He swallowed. "Depends on the day, Your Majesty. Mostly no." She raised an eyebrow, long ears brushing the display. Fascinating. Distrust paired with loyalty, a curious mixture. The tension was eased slightly when one of the junior officers accidentally activated the gravity simulators, sending papers and pens floating like confetti. The queen's copper eyes glittered with amusement, and Elias realized that her charm worked as both a sword and a shield. Every moment with her was dangerous but delightfully unpredictable. By afternoon, Elias found himself in the command deck again, running simulations with the queen, offering insight and sardonic commentary. "Predictable human strategy," she said, tracing a line across the star map with a finger that seemed almost too delicate to exist in real space. "You advance, retreat, advance again, as if playing a poorly choreographed game of hopscotch." Elias laughed despite himself. "Your Majesty, we were going for tactical ingenuity, not interpretive dance." Her ears twitched, betraying amusement, and she tilted her head, considering him. "I may require you to teach me this hopscotch maneuver," she said, voice low, almost conspiratorial. Elias could feel the pull of her presence like gravity, drawing him in even as he reminded himself that she was a master manipulator of minds. The afternoon ended with a minor, yet spectacular, catastrophe. A supply drone carrying experimental weapons misfired, sending a canister spinning across the room, narrowly missing the queen. Elias lunged, catching it midair, and the queen's long ears flicked in what he interpreted as approval. "Impressive reflexes," she said. "Perhaps I misjudged human agility, or perhaps I merely enjoy watching you scramble." His face burned, though he tried to maintain a semblance of composure. Somewhere behind them, a crew member muttered, "She's dangerous," and ridiculously entertaining. As evening fell over the station, Elias escorted the queen to the observation deck to view Trivara's icy plains below. The stars stretched endlessly beyond the glass, their light reflecting in her copper eyes. She spoke softly, almost conspiratorially, about the isolation of empires, the thrill of intelligence, and the seduction of risk. Her whispers were magnetic, almost hypnotic, and Elias felt the pull in every nerve. Yet humor persisted, lightening the tension. An errant cleaning drone collided with a console, broadcasting a distorted rendition of a comedy broadcast from Earth, and the queen's ears twitched in delight. Elias laughed, the sound mingling with hers, and realized that amid danger and desire, moments of levity could make even the most perilous situations strangely bearable. By the time they returned to the central quarters, Elias was caught in an impossible tangle of duty, curiosity, and an undeniable fascination with the queen. He understood that her whispers, her subtle laughter, and the dangerous pull of her presence were a challenge he could not, and would not, resist. Somewhere in the background, a maintenance bot spun in circles again, a silent witness to the chaos, humor, and intoxicating danger that now defined his days. Elias sat quietly for a moment, looking at the stars and then at the queen's profile, ears flicking gently as she reviewed the station logs. He knew this was only the beginning. Every glance, every laugh, every whispered word was a thread in a web that promised both peril and exhilaration. And he realized, with a mixture of dread and thrill, that he had already lost the first round, not to a battle, but to her charm. The alarm klaxon shattered the early quiet of Trivora Station, bouncing off the metal walls with a ferocity that made Elias flinch, despite having spent years in combat zones where alarms were practically background music. "Captain Vorn, status report," barked a junior officer, floating helplessly as zero-gravity scrambled his balance. Elias' pulse raced, though a thread of humor ran through him. If a soldier could survive floating office chairs and coffee packets hitting the ceiling, this was only a minor escalation. "Rogue fleet detected, 30 minutes out, heading for the docking bay," he said, trying to keep the dread from tainting his voice. The Queen, Alethara, appeared at his side, calm as ever, ears flicking at the chaotic noises of the station. "You seem tense," she said, eyes narrowing with amusement. Elias tried not to smirk, but her ears twitched in that same infuriatingly human way, and he felt the familiar pull that had haunted him for days. "A little," he admitted. "Minor fleet, minor danger, minor—" He paused, looking at the crew scrambling. "Panic, minor." She tilted her head, long ears brushing her shoulders, and a laugh that was almost musical slipped out. "Minor, yes, but amusing. Your species has an entertaining way of balancing fear and incompetence." Elias blinked, resisting the urge to fire back a quip that might get him punched or worse, laughed at by her. The station's command bay became a scene of controlled chaos. Holographic star maps blinked erratically as crew members plotted intercept courses, and somewhere a maintenance drone had tangled with a supply crate, spinning like a confused planet in orbit. Alethara leaned over a console, fingers trailing over controls with the ease of someone who had manipulated entire fleets before breakfast. "Your humans are resourceful, if not completely coordinated," she said, voice low and teasing. Elias noticed the way her ears twitched at his every reaction, as if she were reading the precise degree of his anxiety and amusement. He realized she enjoyed seeing him flustered, and that realization made his pulse jump. They initiated defensive maneuvers and the rogue fleet approached, a collection of stolen tech and raw human desperation. Elias had learned from Alethara in the days prior. To anticipate unpredictability, to read not just ships but the minds behind them. "We will need to outthink them, not just outgun them," she whispered, her voice brushing his ear in the middle of a tactical update. The words were dangerous, intoxicating, and Elias felt the old thrill of duty mingle with the chaotic desire that had grown impossible to suppress. He gave the order to activate the station's automated defenses, a combination of magnetic fields, laser grids, and the less conventional glitter cannons, a nod to Alethara's earlier teasing of the station's eccentric AI. The battle unfolded in a mix of precise calculations and absurd accidents. One of the rogue drones malfunctioned, spinning into the path of a pursuing fighter and inadvertently taking out two enemy ships with a perfectly timed collision. Alethara's ears flicked in approval. "Efficiency through chaos," she commented, voice teasing. Elias grinned, realizing that humor had become a weapon in its own right, laughter and absurdity as much as lasers and magnetic pulses. Another bot delivered a misplaced cargo crate, bouncing off a shield generator, knocking it into alignment with a plasma turret, which then blasted an enemy ship into a shimmering cloud of debris. The crew shouted in disbelief, and Alethara's eyes sparkled with delight, ears twitching as though she were personally conducting the chaos like a symphony. Amid the mayhem, Elias found himself moving differently, less rigid, less bound by protocol, and more attuned to the unpredictable patterns of both humans and aliens. He dodged, commanded, and improvised, learning to merge his instincts with Alethara's subtle guidance. Her whispers, once almost dangerous temptations, became instruments of strategy, and he realized that desire and duty were no longer opposing forces, they had become tools of survival. After what felt like hours, though the station's chronometers insisted it was less than 40 minutes, the rogue fleet was in retreat. Debris floated gently in the zero-gravity corridors, glowing softly under emergency lights, and a few surviving drones performed hesitant pirouettes as if acknowledging the absurdity of victory. Elias allowed himself a laugh, feeling the tension release, and caught Alethara's gaze. Her long ears twitched with amusement, and she gave him a smile that was both approving and dangerously enticing. "You humans surprise me," she said. "Not by your power but by your adaptability." They moved to the observation deck, stars stretched infinitely beyond the glass, and the icy surface of Trivora reflected in Alethara's copper eyes. "You have grown, Captain," she whispered, and for the first time Elias recognized the duality in her words, praise, warning, and temptation all wrapped together. "I have learned," he admitted, "to follow, to improvise, to not take everything seriously. Even in danger, even with you." She let out a low, melodic laugh, ears flicking in amusement. "Wisdom paired with humor, most rare among humans. Perhaps you are worthy of more than mere observation." Elias felt the culmination of days spent in her presence, the nervousness, the attraction, the subtle danger, all woven together into clarity. He understood that his journey had reshaped him. He had survived the pull of her whispers without surrendering entirely, found laughter in chaos, and discovered courage that was as much about adaptability as it was about strength. Alethara reached out, just a hand hovering near his shoulder, and the unspoken connection was powerful yet restrained. "Do not mistake my amusement for weakness, human," she said softly, "nor your survival for triviality." Outside, the rogue fleet limped back into the void, leaving the station battered but intact. Crew members floated awkwardly, collecting stray tools, muttering jokes about glitter cannon diplomacy and spinning bots as war heroes. Elias chuckled with them, feeling for the first time that human resilience had a peculiar, almost comedic elegance. Alethara's presence remained magnetic, her whispers still capable of tugging at desire and caution alike, yet he no longer felt powerless. As the station's artificial gravity hummed softly back to normal, Elias and the Queen shared a moment of quiet amidst floating debris, drifting papers, and blinking consoles. He realized that desire, humor, and duty could coexist, that danger could sharpen rather than destroy, and that being captivated by the Queen's whispers did not mean surrender, it meant engagement, understanding, and growth. She leaned slightly,